Thanks so much for that, Nate. Let's get more now on the new plan from the Australian Energy Market Operator to improve the national electricity market. To discuss the report, we're joined in the studio now by the Federal Energy Minister, Josh Frydenberg. Minister, good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
It's an interesting report. It's a mix of retention, investment and expansion. Is the government generally happy with what it reads?
Well, the Energy Market Operator has taken a very close look at the needs of our energy system over the next 20 years and has provided a blueprint as to the infrastructure projects that should be supported. We welcome its words about Snowy 2.0, saying that that is an important nation-building piece of infrastructure, as well as the opportunities in Tasmania to be the battery of the nation. It endorses the National Energy Guarantee, which is key to providing investment stability and certainty in the market going forward. And the focus on more interconnection and transmission is going to be really important for Australia.
And storage.
And storage, absolutely.
All of which is hugely expensive.
Yes.
And it's calling for, and we could run through it chapter to verse, the phrase they use is immediate investment. Immediate investment in transmissibility, in storage and the like. Who pays for that?
Well, this is a question for governments to work through. Normally, these infrastructure projects are regulated investments that are charged to the consumers. But what we've seen in the past is consumers face higher power bills because of the gold plating of the system. We don't want to see a repeat of that. So this is something that the Commonwealth, the states, the territories will talk about as to who will bear the burden of these infrastructure projects.
OK, I'm trying to read between the lines of what you're saying there. You could speak more plainly, but reading between the lines, I think you're saying there, the market operators, you spent too much money on that. We're going to sit down and talk to you and say, no more of that. You need to put your money in this as well, and we'll bring some money to the table too. Yes?
Well, I'm not saying that the Commonwealth is going to pick up the bill, far from it.
No, but clearly you're saying the bill will be shared.
Well, what I'm saying is that these are important assets in the public's interest.
Yes.
And if there could be some contribution from governments, then they need to be closely looked at. But ultimately, there is also a procedure in place where they become regulated investments and consumers are charged over the long term. So these are details that do need to be worked out now that we have this blueprint from AEMO.
But AEMO, of course, isn't in charge of the money. Some of the money is going to have to come from the Commonwealth, if not the states as well. You can't push it all onto the private sector.
Well, we've just made one of the biggest investments ever in energy projects with Snowy 2.0. As you know, we've acquired...
Sure, but I'm talking about all the stuff that they've mentioned there. In particular, the great expense of building the connections now between the states. If you want Tasmania to be the battery of the country, there's going to have to be significant upgrading of any connection.
And the Commonwealth has actually supported the feasibility studies to work out the interconnection between Tasmania and the mainland. So these are projects we're
That's the feasibility study. That's not the actual infrastructure itself.
Well, I haven't come to the table today with a bag of money. What we've done is we've just got the report from the Australian Energy Market Operator. It's an important report.
Sure.
And the other point it makes, Virginia, is that the existing coal assets provide the cheapest form of power generation and should be kept in the system.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. That probably is the most controversial conclusion of all. For the next 20 years, which actually isn't a long time, they're coming to the end of their technical life. The report makes very clear. And Australia, the report also makes very clear, we are moving to, transitioning to a situation where our future is reliable, long-term, renewable energy. But for the next 20 years, as part of that transition, coal stays in the mix. That solves a political problem for you and the troublesome backbench, doesn't it?
Well, it's not about solving a political problem.
No, but it does that as well, doesn't it?
No, because our focus has always been on engineering and economics, not ideology and politics. It's about trying to get people's power bills down, and we have turned the corner. We've started to see prices fall across New South Wales, South Australia and Queensland. But for us here, this report does provide a way forward. It's something we want to work with the states, and clearly there is a case for more investment in infrastructure.
More investment in coal?
Well, in terms of coal, we've always said let the market decide. That's what the National Energy Guarantee does. It removes subsidies, it removes taxes, it involves no trading schemes. But what it does do, it puts a premium on reliability. And after the closure of Hazelwood in Victoria and the closure of the Northern Coal-Fired Power Station in South Australia, we saw a massive jump in wholesale prices, ultimately, which were borne by the consumer, and we don't want to see a repeat of that. And AEMO has therefore stepped in and said, keep those coal assets going for longer to ensure the stability of the system and power prices down.
As we transition. But to try and come at that question another way, it clearly does solve that political issue, and, let's call a spade a spade. power and energy policy in this country has been...
A political football.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, the hottest political football, whereas in other countries it just isn't. It's something that's agreed upon. Anyway, putting that to one side, you've got this backbench elements of it that is absolutely committed to coal. Does it not then embolden them to argue against the governments and AEMO and other groups' argument about that we are long-term permanently transitioning to renewables? Does it not hand them a big stick?
My colleagues want an all-of-the-above strategy. What they don't want...
But you can't have an all-of-the-above forever if you're transitioning to renewables.
But what the AEMO report does say, Virginia, is that you need to be technology neutral and let the market decide. It does point out that the cost of renewables and storage is coming down dramatically, and we've always said that.
Yeah, but it also points out a reality, and it uses the phrase, you know, the end of it, the technical life of the coal-fired power plants. So, you know, others can cling to that all they want. They're coming to the end of their life.
But let's not prematurely close them, otherwise you will see a repeat of what happened in Victoria and South Australia with dramatic increases in prices. Today we have 20 coal-fired power stations. They have an average life of 27 years. So they may not live forever, but they can live for longer. But
that's the blink of an eye, really. Well, the AEMO really only says 20 years, about 20 years to keep them in their mix while you transition. It's the blink of an eye. Is your government, is really any government in this country ready and prepared, and do they have the money and the investment to be able to make sure that transition is a feasible one?
Well, we absolutely are focused on getting the transition right, because Australia has made a number of missteps in the past when it comes to energy policy. We've been gold plating the networks, we've been locking up the gas, we've had uncertainty over climate and energy policy. This is where the National Energy Guarantee steps in. That's why it's so important.
I just want to finish on another matter, if I can. You've been following, I'm sure, the issue in Helsinki and that extraordinary press conference. This is what former CIA Director John Brennan has just said of what Donald Trump, the US President, has said. His comments about believing Vladimir Putin over his own intelligence agencies was nothing short of treasonous. Not only were Trump's comments imbecilic, he's wholly in the pocket of Putin. Republican patriots, where are you? Would you like to return to your comment describing Donald Trump as a dropkick and say that actually you got it right?
Look, I'm not going to pass judgment on the character of the US President.
Well, you did. That's on the record.
Well,
but, I mean, you've now got the former CIA Director calling his comments imbecilic and, more than that, treasonous. If this was an Australian Prime Minister overseas saying something like that about our intelligence agencies, your response would be?
Virginia, what I will focus on is the strength and the importance and the health of our alliance relationship. Ever since it was put in place by Sir Robert Menzies in 1951, it has stood the test of time. Whoever's been in the Lodge and whoever's been in the White House, that will continue to be the case.
That relationship's caught pneumonia with comments like that coming from a president like that,
not the Australia-US relationship. In fact, Malcolm Turnbull has developed a fantastic, close working relationship with the President, as shown by our ability to get out of those steel tariffs that were put in place and protect jobs here at home. And we've proceeded with trade agreements and other priorities for Australia, even if the US and Australia haven't always been on the same page.
I understand it's your birthday today, is that correct?
It is.
Happy birthday. If the ABC had more money, we would have bought you a cake.
Well,
sorry about that.
I take that as an act of goodwill anyway.
Well, you know, see what you can do about that.
Thank you.
Josh Frydenberg, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Virginia.
Thank you. All right, over to Paul now.
Thank you very much, Virginia. Let's return to the Helsinki summit, where Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have agreed to work on the US-Russia relationship, saying it had been at an historic low. Dr. Leonard Petrov is a Russia expert from the Australian National University and joins us now from Sydney. Thank you for your time this morning. We've heard the reaction from the United States and internationally from the events of this news conference and summit. I just want to ask you from a different angle now. Russia is very pleased with how it went. How did President Putin pull this off?
Good morning. Well, indeed, it was a very interesting summit. I think both sides were very well prepared. I would call it a summit of denials. Putin denied any involvement of Russia in American electoral process, and Donald Trump denied any meddling or rather collusion with Russian side during the electoral campaign. But I think it was more